Ayman Khan here for a second out. Pleasure to be in the company of once again top pundit and former three-weight world champion Duke McKenzie, MBE. We're fresh off some big headline news in the boxing world. That is that Terence Crawford gets his hand raised against Canelo Alvarez overseas in Las Vegas. Duke, have you seen the fight? What did you think of Crawford's performance?
First of all, good morning, Ayman, and thanks for inviting me on again. I appreciate you, mate. You know, I think what the world witnessed last night was it's a once in a lifetime. Never happened before. Probably never going to happen again. Terence Crawford is an unbelievable human being, as well as being an unbelievable boxer. What he did last night was made Canelo. I don't want to be disrespectful to Canelo because he's been a fantastic world champion and an incredible ambassador for the sport of boxing. Let's get that right. But you know, Canelo made him look second rate last night. I mean, I made him win by at least 5 rounds. Nobody does that, Canelo. Bivol never did that to Canelo, and he's beaten Canelo. What Crawford managed to do last night, you know, he beat him in just about every department. He beat him at boxing. He beat him at infighting. When they was only sort of shadow boxing, when they stood off each other, Crawford was looking busy doing nothing. All the little feints, all the little twitches, all the little just showing in one shot, not throwing another shot, the little flicking jabs, the little like tippy tap shots on the inside. There wasn't one point in that fight where I thought to myself, Canelo managed to stamp his authority. And also, what I'd like to say about Canelo, that performance he gave last night would have beaten just about anybody else on the planet. It was a good performance by Canelo, but it just wasn't enough. The southpaw stance, which I alluded to earlier and we spoke a few weeks ago, the southpaw stance is enough to give anybody nightmares. And last night it gave him absolute fits. It's, you know, when the southpaw, when you get hit with a southpaw jab, it's hard to get out of the way. When he starts to double it or even triple it, it's even worse. Do you see what I mean? And every now and again, Crawford sunk a little straight left to the body. At no point did Crawford load up in that fight. There was no point we had to really stand and really trade off. And even when he did in the last 2 or 3 rounds, he got the better of the exchanges. So it was a boxing masterclass for me. As you know, I love boxing. I like boxing. I don't like fighting. I like to see boxing. I like it. That's what I call it, the sweet science. And when you see that, it kind of warms your heart. You know, boxing is not lost. Boxing is not dead. Boxing it's a sport. And what you saw last night was boxing of the highest, very, very highest order.
As the fight progressed, what signals was Canelo Alvarez giving off? Because it was visible from the commentary team and from viewers, at least from myself and the people who were surrounding ourselves who were watching the fight, that Canelo seemed frustrated at the shots he was taking, the offense he wasn't able to execute too.
I'm not even so sure, in my heart of hearts, Canelo really believed he could win that fight, because there were certain red flags that I saw in the build-up to the fight, like when he first turned up in Las Vegas and he stretched, blacked out, triple door, Rolls Royce. He had the Armani suit on. He had his wife on one hand. He had his kid on the other side. That's a sign of a man that's really comfortable. That's not a sign of a man that's really hungry. At the weigh-in, when Canelo patted Crawford on the back and shook his hand, I mean, plenty of people say that's sportsmanship, which it is. And yeah, that is how you should conduct yourself in a sportsman's, like in a sport which isn't as not a combat sport. But when you're in a combat sport, the last thing I want to do is shake my opponent's hand. And the last thing I want to do is pat him on the back. Even during the fight, when things got a little bit heated and there was an accidental clash of heads, the first thing Canelo went was, "Oops, sorry, mate. If that had been me, I'd have probably want to have done it again or put my thumb in that cut and made it even worse." I know it sounds gory. I know it sounds not very nice, but that's the sort of things you win by any means necessary. But Canelo wasn't doing that. So like I say, these were all red flags for me. I think he's earned, as I said previously, he's earned far too much money. He's been a tremendous ambassador for the sport. He's been a great world champion, no doubt, Canelo. But there's changing in the guard, mate. And Crawford looked nothing but absolutely, he looked brilliant last night. And even after the fight, Crawford was almost deflated. He was almost subdued. He wasn't overjoyed in the victory, because he knew in his heart of hearts he was going to beat Canelo. And he, like I say, he seemed a little deflated to me. So all that really said to me was the guy knew he had his number. He, right from the outset, when he first said he wanted to fight Canelo, he knew he had his number. So after the fight, there was nothing really to jump up and down for. And I'm not so sure that Crawford should have probably said that he'd been in with harder punches, because that was a little bit below the belt for my liking. But you tell it like it is. If he has, then he has. But I really believe that's because he didn't allow Canelo to nail him with a clean shot. The little pullbacks, the little feints, the little roll of the head, the little step off, side to side. Stand in the southpaw stance, though, which is the hardest part if you're not a natural southpaw. Stand in that stance for the whole 12 rounds. Mate, it was brilliant. It was beautiful to watch. I'm going to watch it again.
Sticking with Canelo, he said post-fight in the press conference, speaking to my colleague Radio Raheem, he mentioned that he felt that he was trying and he kept on trying until the final bell, but his body couldn't do what he wanted it to do. What does that say to you about Canelo's future in the sport or at the top of the sport?
Well, it tells you everything you need to know. As I said previously, this isn't the Canelo that boxed Miguel Cotto in one of his best career-defining fights, where it really was Canelo. The head feints, the little blocks, the slips, the staying in close and not getting hit in the pocket. All that's gone now. Canelo's become, and I don't want this to sound disrespectful, but he's a one-track pony now. You know what's coming. You know that big right hand's coming or that big left hook is coming. And if you can read that, then you can beat him, which is what Crawford did. They had their game plan, which a lot of boxers talk about, and very few of them actually execute, but they had their game plan and he executed it to an absolute T. He never put a foot wrong all night long, Terence Crawford, and he was brimming with confidence from start to finish. And, the right man won. It was beautiful to watch. Like I say, I love my boxing, and it was great to see. It was a great display of boxing. It really was.
What of the future of Terence, who he was asked whether he could go up to light heavy? He completely shut that down, said that wasn't for him. He also said that he wasn't moving back down to welterweight, so the potential that he might go to 154 super welter or potentially middleweight, or maybe even retire or have a rematch with Canelo. What avenue do you see left for him?
The most obvious avenue would be to have a return with Canelo, because Canelo graciously granted him this fight. That would be it would be interesting, but the outcome would be the same. I'd like to see a return if that's indeed what both fighters want. What I really don't want for Canelo is to continue in the sport and get wiped out by someone that's just on the ascendancy, on the way up. There's a lot of young, hungry guys out there. David Benavidez being one of them. And I don't think either of them, Canelo or Crawford, want any part of Benavidez, because he is the Mexican monster. He's the Canelo of 10 years ago, Benavidez. So I think with Crawford, then probably a drop down to maybe 160 or 154. I don't think you want to go down that low. I think one more for Crawford at maybe 160, maybe. And Canelo, maybe a return, if he can get it, with Crawford as his last hurrah. But he clearly stated, Canelo, he didn't know what to do with the southpaw stance. He couldn't get past that. He couldn't get past the southpaw jab. He couldn't work him out. Those were his words, not mine. And it's not really come as a major surprise. Not when you're talking about the elite of the elite. I've been a world champion, as you know, a 3-division world champion. I'm not blowing my own trumpet. What I'm trying to do is put my career in some kind of perspective. I don't know what it is to be undisputed. I was never that good. Do you see what I mean? I couldn't have been that good to fight for an undisputed world title. Crawford's an undisputed 3-time world champion, which for some of your fans who might not even realise or even know, he's won all 4 belts, WBA, WBC, IBF, WBO. He's won all the 4 belts in 3 separate weight divisions. That signifies true greatness. Nobody else in the sport of boxing has done that, ever. So it's so, you know what, it's beautiful. It really is.
If we were to fast forward about an hour or two, all the all the potential fighters that you'd place at number one will have made their case for that number one spot. Alexander Usyk has recently come off the victory over Daniel Dubois, capturing the undisputed heavyweight title for the second time round. Crawford, we've just seen what he did the night previously, and in a way, he's in against Akhmadaliev as well in a matter of moments. But for you, off of the back of what Crawford displayed just hours ago, does he make your number one rank?
No question. None of the above you've just mentioned are three-time undisputed world champions. They might be one-time undisputed, they might be a two-time, but they're not a three-time undisputed. For whatever the reasons, Usyk couldn't do it, or maybe he could because he's a two-time undisputed. He can maybe drop down to Bridgerweight or whatever they want to call it, and maybe become undisputed there if he wants to equal Crawford's achievement. But for me, Crawford stands head and shoulders above any other fighter on the planet. And when you put him in the pantheon of the greatest fighters of all time, I don't know who beats him, you know. He's a three-time undisputed. It's never been done. Duran's never done it. Hagler's never done it. Ray Leonard's never done it. Ray Robinson's never done it. Name any of the greatest fighters on the planet that have lived, past or present. Nobody's done it. You might say it's a generational thing, and maybe boxing's a little bit easier now than it was in those days, or maybe it's harder now in those days, but you can only beat what's put in front of you, and that's exactly what he's done. He hasn't slipped up once, not in preliminary fights, not in interim fights, not in world title fights, not in world title defenses. That takes some doing. Fighters like Crawford don't come along every day of the week. That's why he's the first and probably will be the only fighter in our lifetime that ever achieves this magnificent feat. It's truly unbelievable. A three-division undisputed world champion. I'm so excited for the guy.
Let me just throw a couple of names at you and let me get your take as to whether Crawford beats them or gives them a run for his money at a weight lower than, of course, light heavy or super middle. If Crawford doesn't choose to stay there at 154, the likes of Jaron Ennis or Sebastian Fundora. At middleweight, the likes of Yannick Alim Kanuli. Who else have we got here? There was another one I was thinking. I mentioned Ennis, I mentioned Fundora, I mentioned Alim Kanuli. I think Mario Barrios as well too, who had captured the welterweight title if he chooses to go back down to welterweight. But any of those names you see coming close to Crawford or maybe even beating him?
Nobody's beaten Terence Crawford. You know, he finds a way. He dissects you. You know, even in the early rounds against Canelo, when they were just sort of like juggling for position and just flicking out that jab, and you know, Canelo just couldn't get past that jab. He couldn't get close enough for him. He's got a very unique southpaw stance where once those southpaw hands go up, he looks a little bit like Pernell Whitaker. When the hands come down, he's a little bit like Ray Leonard. You don't know who you're fighting when you got Crawford in front of you. He's that special. He's so sensible, Crawford, because he's not going to stay around in this sport and have that one fight too many just for the money. I'm sure now he deserves the 100 million or the 150 million because he is Mr. Boxing. He's the face of boxing, and he deserves that huge payday. Like 50 million's not enough, which is what I believe he got for this last fight, and Canelo got 150 million. So he's in the driving seat now, Crawford. I'd like to see him, like I say, drop down maybe to 160, pick somebody, it doesn't really matter who, he's going to beat them, and then retire. And I think that's what he'll probably do. You know, all boxers deserve every penny that they earn, because ultimately when they step between those ropes, your life's on the line, and you want to make sure you're getting paid for your life if that's what's on the line. And that's what he's got. And, you know, if he gets another huge payday, that's his pension money, then he can ride off into the sunset. One of the first things he said after the victory was, I said, what are you going to do, go off and celebrate? He said, no, I'm going home to my family. Listen, that man's a man after my own heart. I love being at home. I love being around my family. It's the most beautiful thing in the world. And that's Crawford. I can really relate to a lot of things he said last night because he's just a real down-to-earth, regular guy.
Two names I like to link with Canelo have been linked previously. Eubank Jr. and Hamza Shiraz. Would you back Canelo to beat either of them?
On that performance that he gave last night, sure. Like I say, Canelo's not finished, not by a long stretch. If he decides to continue in boxing, let's just say Crawford decides to retire, then Canelo steps right back into the frame and could be undisputed again if Crawford retired. But that's not going to be the case. So, but nobody's beating Canelo. Canelo is not the fighter that he once was. We all know that. But what he produced last night is still good enough to beat anybody that's around right now. Or maybe not Benavidez, because Benavidez, the Mexican monster, is a young, hungry, two-fisted gunslinger, really, who would give anybody nightmares. Will beat anybody right now in the middleweight, super middleweight, light heavyweight. I know he's up to light heavyweight, Benavidez now, but if he boiled back down to super middleweight, then I wouldn't fancy Crawford against him. He's just too big.
One final thing that just popped into my head. Canelo mentioned, and he was asked at the press conference who he thought was better, Floyd Mayweather or Terence Crawford, and he actually picked Terence Crawford. Do you go with that? Would you, in a fantasy sort of matchup, pitch the two skill sets together and go for Crawford over Mayweather?
I actually think it's wrong to do a here and now. Because you're only as good as whoever's put in front of you, and Mayweather equally, like Crawford, beat everybody that was put in front of him. You can't say he had easy touches or he beat soft touches. You beat what's put in front of you. Is Crawford better than Mayweather? I wouldn't even like to compare, to be honest with you. I think Mayweather at lightweight, 9'9", untouchable, absolutely untouchable. Mayweather probably at welterweight, again, untouchable. He proved that in his career. But as Crawford has done in his career, beating everybody put in front of him, we're never going to know that. That's one of them conundrums, isn't it? That you go, if, but, maybe. We're never going to know. And I don't really want to know, to be honest with you, because they're both unbelievable world champions. That's what separates the good from the great. Undisputed now really means there's no question. You can't say, well, who could have beat who, or who could have beat A, could have beat B, or you're undisputed, and you're undisputed for a period of time, and then you walk away into the sunset, unbeaten. What a thing to tell your children.
Duke, your opinions are unbeaten. I appreciate your time speaking to take us out. Looking forward to our next conversation already.
Thanks, champ. Who you got for Inoue?
I'm gonna back Inoue to get the victory. Yeah.
Yeah, you got
points. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. All right, champ. Look, God bless. Have a great day. Appreciate it, man. Thanks for getting me on again, champ. I'll talk to you again.
No worries. Speak.